Do you believe that big data is necessarily better data?
No. And I think that's actually, talking about misconceptions, that's actually a misconception we need to deal with. One of the key things that we found ourselves explaining as we sort of rolled out the public guide, and subsequently we've rolled out a number of other collaborations around that, has been that the key question is to, first of all, establish whether the data was collected. I don't know whether you're a plural or a singular show for data, but data were collected to answer the question. Because there's a lot of excitement around, we talked about with people not understanding, but you do have a bit of things at the other end of a bit of the opposite, which is sometimes people imagine that the data will just be there for you to answer exactly the question that you've got. And if you've got great big data sets, if you've been gathering all the information, for example, that we now know in real time what the usage of a metro system is, how much people are paying for their tickets when they're traveling, and all of that, we can track all of those things, and we've got a lot of data. So people imagine that that's actually designed in such a way that you can just ask any question of it. And they don't realize the research process where you would actually think about the biases that exist in that data set. That you'd remind yourself in doing this that you're only looking at a past. That's the whole point about data is always past. We're always looking at the past, which means that we've always got to apply a lens of thinking what was going on then that might not be going on tomorrow. And that's those simple understandings, I think, are really, really important as we approach data sets. And then we think, okay, it's not about the size of the data. The size sometimes counts, but it's about understanding how well the data answers the question. And there are times when a small study where the data is gathered in a way that has anticipated all the biases and the limitations and the strengths, and ensured that you're actually getting data that answer the question rather than a proxy question. For example, you might want to find out whether somebody is experiencing ongoing pain following a treatment intervention, but you may be reading something such as their doctor visits, follow-up visits. Well, you can do that on the largest data set out there, the largest patient data set. But if the doctor visits weren't representative of ongoing pain, but they were perhaps as a result of some stomach upset instead that was caused by the same intervention, you're not measuring the thing you're measuring. So no matter how big it gets, in fact, if anything, the bigger it gets, the more the distortion occurs. And that's also another point about big, is that sometimes you introduce into your data set a whole range of considerations that you haven't allowed for, or that mean you move further away from answering your question. So I think big is not always better. I wonder whether we've ended up in a place where there's an assumption that big is better because of the number of unrepresentative samples that were used in the past. That became a regular criticism that was levied at, people would rush to say that some new thing was going to cause a risk to your health, or they'd rush to sort of produce their results from their study into a media report. And those things were not representative. And so we all learned, in a good way, I think, throughout the noughties, we all learned to ask the question, is this a representative sample? And so in the process, kind of big became good. And big is not necessarily good.